A 4th gen Supra and a C3 Corvette might seem like an odd matchup, but what lies below these detailed bodies are two nearly identical 3D printed RC chassis, with one difference. Which one is right for your next RC model car project? Let's find out. Hello everyone and welcome! Version 1.2 of the popular FP UC1 chassis is out. A huge thanks to all of our Patreon supporters. It's their help that makes these videos and 3D printable RC chassis kits possible. I'll talk a bit more about this chassis and what's new in a moment, but right now I want to focus in on these two cars right here. Let's start with this cool looking 68 Corvette race car. I completed this build not that long ago, so it's a project many of you probably recognize. It uses a body from this AMT plastic model kit and represents an inexpensive RC build that has some great scale looks and is fun to drive. While this was far from the best model kit I've ever put together, I made it work, and thanks to some paint, decals, and a bit of an experiment with some weathering, it really looks the part, and I've certainly enjoyed racing this around the shop. This 95 Supra body was also sourced from an AMT plastic model kit, though that was an all-around much better kit with more detail and better fitting parts. I built this car a few years ago, and after having raced this car around the track countless times, I'm happy to say it drives as good as it looks. If you'd like to learn more about these projects, check out the video links below in the description. Both very different on the outside, though underneath these cars sit on top of our popular FP UC1 chassis design. Though extremely basic, lacking any of the details that you might see on other RC chassis such as these, the simplicity and ease of assembly is what makes these chassis ideal for some projects. Custom, highly detailed chassis are awesome, but they do require a lot of time and patience to build and can be more susceptible to damage. In contrast, the FPUC1 platform is cheap, simple, easy to 3D print, easy to build, and it's adjustable, allowing it to fit many different 1/24th and 1/25th scale bodies. For those reasons, it's probably the best platform for newer hobbyists interested in diving into the world of custom RC model car building, though having some prior experience with plastic models and RC vehicles is a good prerequisite. Even though I really enjoy the more detailed builds, I also equally enjoy these more simplistic projects, and I can race them around the track with far less concern than I would with some of the more highly detailed cars. When you're 3D printing all of the parts for your chassis, you'll have the option of whether you want to use an N20 motor and gear assembly or a 130 size motor. These are far from high-performance, purpose-built RC motors, but they're cheap and are well suited for these types of RC model car builds. I've got a 4,000 RPM N20 motor installed on the Corvette, and the larger, higher-speed 7,000 RPM RF130 motor in the Supra. Today I'm going to be doing a fun comparison, seeing which one is faster around this tight indoor track. Now, of course, it might seem obvious that the Supra, with its bigger, faster motor, would obviously be the faster car around the track. However, one thing to consider is the acceleration. There is no gear reduction between the motor and the rear axle, just two 6-tooth, easy to FDM 3D print gears. There is gear reduction on the N20 motor, giving it a lot more torque and faster acceleration, but a much lower top speed compared to the 130 size motor. It takes a little time to get going, but once it does, you can hit some pretty high speeds. Just sort of have to maintain the momentum around the corners. It actually makes for a pretty interesting and fun driving experience. You have to make the turns just right, otherwise you won't have as much speed coming out of them. On a much larger, faster track, the 130 motor would be absolutely superior. It's way faster once it gets going. But on a tight track such as this, I wasn't sure which car would be faster. I put these cars to the test by running 8 10-lap time trials, starting with the Vette. Both of these cars have silicone tires, and on these foam mats there's tons of traction. The bumps formed where two pieces fit together can also make things quite interesting. Honestly, to get the most out of your RC model car racing experience, you really want to drive on a surface with less traction so you actually have some understeer and oversteer to contend with, rather than basically just driving a slot car with steering, but that's just my opinion. As expected, acceleration is quick, but top speed is limited. Even on this tiny track, I'm pretty much hitting top speed. The Supra was slow to accelerate, but once it gets going, I was able to get some quick laps. It's a lot of fun to drive because you have to balance not entering a turn too quick, but also getting on the throttle early enough so that you can come out of it with some speed. This car can't get anywhere near its top speed on such a small track, since it takes some time and distance to achieve top speed, much like a real car. Still a lot of fun though, even on this tight indoor track. As for the results, well, despite its much slower acceleration and lower torque, Even on a tight track, the Supra with its 130 size motor is the faster car, turning in the fastest lap of 4.84 seconds. So does that mean the 130 motor is the one to get? Well, not necessarily. If you don't plan on racing your car around and instead only want to drive at slower speeds, the N20 motor offers much better modulation at lower speeds. Also, the N20 motors have a flat spot on the shaft, eliminating the possibility of the gear spinning independently of the motor. The RF130 motor has a smaller, round shaft, and I have encountered some issues in the past with the shaft spinning inside the gear. To correct that issue, I simply glued the gear to the shaft, and it's been holding on just fine. Still though, because of the tendency for the 130 motor shaft to spin inside the gear, we don't include a 130 motor option in the kits that we sell on our store, only in the downloadable STL file version that you can 3D print at home. The N20 motor does have a lower profile, which may be beneficial if you plan to add an interior to your car. Just a few things to consider, but regardless of which motor you choose, both cars are a ton of fun to drive and certainly don't hesitate to experiment. As I mentioned at the start of this video, the latest version of the FP UC1 chassis is here. Changes are pretty minor, but include various adjustments to help improve the fitment of hardware and bearings, an ultra-narrow version better suited for bodies under around 67mm in width, new simple, easy to FDM 3D print wheel options, and the addition of some body mounts and other pieces that have been posted on a Patreon separately, which we have now consolidated into the latest version of chassis files. All parts are designed to be easily 3D printable on a typical hobby FDM 3D printer. The links to the files are of course below in the description. You'll also find tutorial videos and other helpful information on Patreon. Thanks again everyone for your support, and big thanks to everyone for watching. Stay tuned for more chassis designs coming very soon.